Namaskar, Nileshok. In another episode, today we will discuss the frequently asked question about the first day of Mahabharata War. The two contenders, two competing answers are as follows. There is a group of Mahabharata researchers who claim, who assert, who assume, who presume that Kartik Amavasya as the first day of Mahabharata War. Let me take you to the screen itself. Okay, so let me just share the screen. And then there is another group which do not assert but claim or insist that Margashirsha Shukla Ekadashi is the first day of the war. Now, everyone in the first group does not or do not necessarily assert, because the word assert, at least in the scientific sense, means there is a backup evidence. And again, by evidence, I'm referring to that evidence which can be objectively tested, logically put together to corroborate, to validate the claim, in this case, Kartika Amavasya. So there is a variation there. Some people are assuming, presuming for different reasons. I'm going to say only one person asserts that Kartik Amavasya is the first day of the Mahabharata War, and that's yours truly, namely Nileshok. I said that nobody is asserting or even can assert that Margashirsha Shukla Ekadashi because they don't have any evidence for it. And you will see that both parties will bring something in support of why they claim what they claim, whether Kartik Amavasya or Margashirsha Shukla Ekadashi, and I'll say why that is not a scientific evidence, not a empirical evidence, not something you can objectively test. All right. Now I'm going to give you the answer. Basically, the presentation is about why Kartik Amavasya is the first day of the Mahabharata War. Of course, we will do the Purva Paksha. Let's begin with our doubt clearing machine, the logic of scientific method, or in the language of Nyaya Darshana, Pancha Vayava, okay, the 5 limbs of Pararthanuman. These are required how we actually conduct the research, okay, for our own sanity, and definitely required to be methodically employed, methodically used, methodically present how we made that innovation, how we made that discovery, or how we eliminated the doubt, the samshay. So in this case, the tough problem to solve is what is the first day of the Mahabharata War. By day, we specifically mean here the lunar month and Tithi. Now, let's begin with this group who claims that the Margashirsha Shukla Ekadashi is the first day of the Mahabharata War. So let's begin with their answer because it's there in their mind. Okay, we are going to see how a poor basis or poor foundation this is based on. And especially if we use the logic of scientific method, the 5-element formula, the doubt clearing machine goes by different names, you will see why I am saying that it's based on a poor foundation. For example, one may ask, hey, how did you arrive at this Margashirsha Shukla Ekadashi? What is your theory and what was the evidence that was driven by that statement of a theory? how did you objectively test it, and what background knowledge did you take it for granted, as in agama. Okay, here would be their answers. Now if you ask them, they would be actually stunned and would not even know what to answer. Many of them, majority of them, almost all of them, and I would love to see an exception, they wouldn't even understand what you are asking. If you ask what is the statement of your theory and how that drove to a specific evidence and how did you test the evidence in objective fashion, they would be dumbfounded. This is how majority of the Mahabharata dating researchers simply do not understand the logic of scientific method. But we may try it for them and see. I tried and say what could be their theory. I couldn't think of it, and it would be very interesting if they come up with something. Well, so if you ask them theory, they are going to say, what is it, what are you talking? And if you don't have a theory, and I would recall Einstein's quote. Einstein says, it is the theory that defines what can be observed. Okay, that defines, that decides what can be observed. Well, if you don't have a theory, you can come up with anything. And if people who are on the receiving end do not understand any of this, hey, you can fool them. And that has exactly what has happened. So if you don't have a theory, what to speak of evidence? I mean, anything can be presented as evidence, or actually you have no good set of evidence in the logical fashion, because if you put the evidence, somebody is going to say, what is your theory? And again, these people will go blank. Now if you don't have a theory, if you don't have therefore evidence or otherwise, where comes the question of testing something in an empirical and objective fashion? No evidence, no testing. So the question, how did these people figure it out? They have something, and that goes to the background knowledge. In this case, they use parampara, tradition. And the specific aspect they are going to tell you, not many people even tell you that because they don't even know this. But some will definitely tell you that, hey, look, in a traditional science, in our tradition, in our parampara, we celebrate Gita Jayanti, Gita as in Bhagavad Gita Jayanti, on Margashirsha Shukla Ekadashi, Margashirsha Shukla 11. That's the Tithi of Shukla Paksha. And what is the significance of the Gita Jayanti? Well, at least in a tradition, the assumption and the presumption is that that is the day when Bhagwan Krishna narrated the philosophy of Bhagavad Gita, the Bhagavad message of Bhagavad Gita, whatever way you want to put it, to Arjun. And when was that day? That was the first day of the Mahabharata War. And therefore, if we are celebrating Gita Jayanti on Margashirsha Shukla 11, well, why would we just randomly celebrate this? That would be the argument of this group. And therefore, Margashirsha Shukla Ekadashi must be, or they feel convinced that that is the first day of the Mahabharata War. At least you can see that this does not fulfill the information that is a minimum necessary for the 5 elements of doubt clearing machine. However, also let's admit that they are using something from the parampara, from the tradition. And somebody says, what's wrong with it? Oh, there is nothing wrong with it. You can always start with a parampara tradition if you don't have any other piece of more reliable information. Okay, you have, what else you are going to do? But is that the situation when it comes to determining the first day of the Mahabharata War? The answer is decisively no, that's not the situation. And we'll get to that. Okay, but before that, let's look at the other option. Okay, again the same question. What is the first day of the Mahabharata War, as in the sense of lunar month and tithi? And let's give the other answer, which is Kartika Amavasya. Okay, and to a significant number of folks, if you ask this question, even those Mahabharata dating researchers who insist that, yeah, I take Kartik Amavasya as the first, and you say, well, how did you arrive at that conclusion? Again, you're going to find for majority of them, not all of them, there are exceptions, or there is one exception, namely yours truly, Nilisho. But others will also struggle. They will say, if you ask them, what's your theory that you used to arrive at this conclusion? They would say, what are you talking? And of course, once you don't have a statement of a theory in a scientific fashion, in a logical fashion, there is always a confusion as to which evidence to test or what is evidence. And if you have a confusion related to the evidence, then of course the same problem with the objective testing. No evidence, no testing. What are you talking, man? So how does this second group arrives at their answer, which is different than Margashirsha Shukla Ekadashi? Kartik Amavasya is their answer. How do they arrive at this? They also come from a parampara, but they actually refer to a specific discussion from the Mahabharata text itself. That is known as Krishna Karna dialogue. Krishna left from Upaplavya, traveled to Hastinapur. This is all before the war, on a peace mission, trying to see if the war can be avoided. He did not succeed. Then he left for Upaplavya, where Pandavas were stationed. On the way, or before leaving Hastinapur, he made one attempt to discuss something with Karna. That's not relevant for today's discussion other than this specific reference. So we'll not discuss it. But on the way back, before leaving Hastinapur, he is discussing with Karna. And in that discussion, after trying to negotiate with Karna, in which he failed, Krishna makes a point to tell Karna to convey a message to Bhishma and Drona. And that specific message is regarding the beginning of a war. Now, that shlok goes like this. It comes in a Udyog Parva, critical edition, Adhyay 140, verse number, shlok number 18. In a Gita Press edition, Adhyay 142, shlok number 18. Saptama chapi divasad amavasya bhavishyati sangramam yojaye tatra tam yahu shakra devatam. A very simple, crude, useful translation, that there is going to be Amavasya in 7 days. The specific astronomy designation that Krishna is saying, Tam Yahu Shakra Devatam, okay, that falls on Shakra Devata. Now, what does that mean? We have 27/28 nakshatra. Each of the nakshatra has a nakshatra devata in the sense of astronomy. And many times, not all the times, the nakshatra is referred to by the nakshatra devata, referring to nakshatra devata rather than stating the nakshatra itself, like Ashwini, Bharani, Kritika, Rohini, etc. It might be referred to as Prajapatyam cha nakshatra. And those who understand these basics of astronomy nakshatra devata, if you say Prajapatyam cha nakshatra, immediately they will understand the person is referring to Rohini. If Agni is the nakshatra devata, people will immediately understand they are referring to Kritika. If Bhaga is the nakshatra devata, they will immediately understand the person is referring to Uttara Falguni. Okay? And so on. Similarly, since the reference is made to Shakra Devata, with a reasonable accuracy we can say the person is referring to Nakshatra Jeshta. Now, those of you who don't understand it, you have to stop the video, assuming this is important to you, or you can take it on a Shraddha and move on with the video and watch rest of the video. But if this is important, in the sense, unless you know this, you cannot go any further, and that's not a bad thing, then you need to stop this, pull my books, references, or just go to internet, type Nakshatra and Nakshatra Devata and become familiar with it. Become familiar with some of the differences, because people with extremely limited knowledge, at a drop of a hat, if they don't get exactly what is stated there, and they're just going to go on a bizarre tangent. Okay, for example, depending on a specific ancient Indian text you are referring to, sometimes there can be a little bit of variation in the nakshatra devata stated for a specific nakshatra. Sometimes the differences are trivial in the sense of sometimes Chandra might be said as a Soma or a Shashi, means the same thing, but a person new to this whole subject may find it confusing. And other times there can be a slight exchange or variation. For example, take Purva Falguni and Uttara Falguni. Okay, Purva Falguni, the Nakshatra Devata may be listed as Aryaman and Uttara Falguni as a Bhaga, and in some Grantha they have reversed the roles. Now, some naive or otherwise researchers, and because we are talking about Mahabharata, I will say Mahabharata researchers will pick such a nitpicking thing, and sometimes it's relevant and it must be done. Other times it is only to hide, okay, the extremely irrelevant and extremely mediocre work that they have done. They will pull some random objection, okay, just to distract individuals from focusing attention on the utter nonsense that these Mahabharata dating researchers have created. Therefore, I'm just warning you. In this case, Tam Yahu Shakra Devatam. Shakra Devata Shakra is a deity or Nakshatra Devata of a Jeshta Nakshatra, and we can just take that. It can get complicated. Let's not make it complicated. Again, that all goes into the background knowledge. Okay, so here Krishna, see, this is how the digression happens, but I will also tell you this is quote from great Joseph Campbell. He says, the best instructors or best teachers are master digressors. In fact, during the digression, you actually get the knowledge that you would not get otherwise anywhere. All right, let's get back to the subject. So, Krishna is telling Karna to inform Bhishma and Drona that, hey, look, in 7 days there is going to be Amavasya in the context or in the vicinity of Nakshatra Jeshta. And here there are two interpretations, okay, done by different individuals. Sangramam yojayet tatra. Now, some people have translated this to mean, let's begin the war on that Amavasya when Amavasya is in a Jeshta Nakshatra or near Jeshta Nakshatra. Others have translated this as the Sangramam Yojayet Tatra in the sense of let's begin the war preparations on that day, not the war itself. Now, many folks, many Mahabharata dating researchers, and just because it's fresh on my mind, recently I had a wonderful debate discussion with Sri Vedvir Aryaji, hosted by HyperQuest, Vishal Chaurasiyaji, and you can watch that video. I asked during that video, and maybe that's enough reason to watch that video multiple times, if required, of course, and it will be required. So, multiple times, guys. Both Vedvir Aryaji and myself, we agree at least on the choice of the first day of the Mahabharata War. Okay, in fact, that is the only thing we agree. Okay, as Kartik Amavasya. And in that context, during the debate, I asked him, so Vedvirji, why do you pick Kartik Amavasya? What is your rationale? And so I'm just using this opportunity to explain the rationale given by him, which I already stated, because based on a Krishna Karna dialogue where Krishna is asking Karna to convey to Bhishma and Drona that in 7 days there is going to be Amavasya in the context of or related to in the vicinity of Nakshatra Jeshta, because it's Devata, it's Nakshatra Devata is Shakra. Let's begin the war there, or let's begin the war preparations. Now, naturally, Vedvir Aryaji is taking the translation as let's begin the war that time. Dr. P.V. Vartak also took it that way, and there are many others who took it that way. But the important point, and this can be lost, so I'm therefore asking you to underline this in your mind. The important point is it does not matter whether you take this Sangramam Yojayet Tatra to mean begin the war preparations or begin the war itself. There is sufficient evidence, actually too much evidence, for many different instances that happen in the chronological sense, but also with a specific nakshatra information. The day stamp is there, that occurred between this day when Krishna had a dialogue with Karna and the first day of the Mahabharata war. And if one assumes only 7 to 8 days between Krishna Karna dialogue and the first day of the war, none of this can be explained. So here, very in an appropriate sense, is better, it's more appropriate, more logical to take the translation as Sangramam Yoje Tatra to mean let's begin the war preparation. But let me make one more point. Again, somebody will say, no, hold on, that's your interpretation, but Krishna said, let's begin the war. Yeah, maybe let's assume that Krishna did say that. In that case, I will say, Krishna might have said this. Krishna might have suggested through Karna to Bhishma and Drona that let's begin the war 7 days from their dialogue day. But the reality is, sufficient Mahabharata evidence will tell you otherwise, which is to say Krishna might have requested and might have suggested the beginning of a war and not the preparation of the war. It doesn't matter, still enough evidence that it did not begin. So Krishna might have suggested, and we don't know, Mahabharata doesn't tell us what happened in between, but we do know that the war did not begin in 7 to 8 days. Guys, this is very critical. In fact, that by itself falsifies Vedvira Aryaji's proposal of 3162, specifically the first day, as in whatever the day he chose, especially for the event of Krishna Karna dialogue and the first day of the war. This is also true for Dr. P.V. Vartak, especially the first day he chose and the gap between Krishna Karna dialogue. Since the first day that he chose, I have shown this to be correct. So what do we do? The first day is correct, but the gap between Krishna Karna dialogue and the first day equal to 7 days as proposed by Dr. P.V. Vartak is not correct. This is how we do research, guys. Okay, so I'm just using this opportunity to give you insights how actually we have to go through these details and try to solve this jigsaw puzzle. Okay. So, Krishna Karna dialogue, if somebody says based on that they have arrived at Kartik Amavasya, the answer is not correct. Okay, so the answer is correct, but the reasoning and rationale is not correct. So, what is correct? Let's start with that same question again. What is the first day of the Mahabharata war? And can anyone recall my theory for the dating of Mahabharata and Ramayana? Yes. It is the same theory, guys. When I test Arundhati Vasishtha observation, I don't have one theory. When I test Bhishma Nirvana evidence, I don't have another theory. That's idiotic, that's unscientific, that's illogical. You have to have the same theory. Now, sometime, depending on the type of evidence you are trying to analyze, you may need an auxiliary hypothesis as opposed to ad hoc hypothesis. We will talk about that another time. I have already made one episode on this, auxiliary versus ad hoc hypothesis, and we will be talking a lot more about this in future. But this theory has to be the same. We just don't change the theory as soon as we get to another piece of evidence, unless we are totally going different. In fact, therefore, I put the theory in a very generic fashion. I did not even use the word astronomy in it, although it can be used because we are looking at astronomy evidence here. The theory statement is very generic, universal, as it should be in any scientific investigation. What is it? Descriptions of Mahabharata text are descriptions of Mahabharata times. If you want to make it bit specific for the astronomy evidence that we are discussing, you may make it astronomy descriptions of Mahabharata text are descriptions of Mahabharata times. Everyone clear? Okay. So as soon as we define the statement of a theory, it becomes very clear. It puts constraints on the kind of evidence. So descriptions of Mahabharata text, guys, you cannot go anywhere outside. You cannot go to parampara. You cannot go to tradition, okay, and so on and so forth. And if you put astronomy descriptions, well, that may include chronology descriptions also. Then only those descriptions. And of course, there's a lot of astronomy descriptions, but to solve this problem, we do not need all of them, nor the rest of the thing that I do not include conflicts in any way. So I'm going to jump and tell you the answer. So based on this, the astronomy descriptions of the Mahabharata text that I pulled in, okay, this is called, the classification, okay, vargikaran. Like, I need only certain set of observations to solve the problem, okay. I mean, your kitchen may be filled with all kinds of spices and your refrigerator may be filled with all kinds of vegetables, but if you are making eggplant bharta, bangan bharta, then you need only eggplant from the vegetable section and certain spices. You don't need everything, okay. Something similar. All that we need here are the descriptions and of the phases and positions of the moon, and of course we should take all of them, okay, because that's a basically scientific condition, that you are not cherry picking them. There are some that I have not picked up, so I will just briefly state it, because the reason I have not picked up is, we can look at this problem as a Kartik Amavasya versus Margashirsha Shukla Ekadashi. First, in a very simplistic fashion of Amavasya versus Ekadashi or Shukla Ekadashi, and then of course we can make it more specific as in Kartik Amavasya and as in Margashirsha Shukla Ekadashi. So just to give that idea, I will say the few that I have not included, just to keep it simple, straightforward, are the upper and lower limits in the sense of lunar month and a tithi that are given as constraints by the evidence of Mahabharata text. Namely, the first day of the Mahabharata war must be after the full moon day of Kartika, full moon day of Kartika months, okay. So the Kartik Amavasya is the day that comes about 15 days after Kartik Purnima, okay, that is the definition. And Margashirsha Shukla Ekadashi would come what? About 11 days after Kartik Amavasya. On the upper side, the limit is that Chaitra Purnima, okay, full moon of Chitra. And everything has to happen before that, including the passing away of Bhishma, the day of Bhishma Nirvana. These are the conditions, these are the constraints given by the Mahabharata text. Now, Margashirsha Shukla Ekadashi and Kartik Amavasya both satisfy these conditions, so that's why I did not include those external conditions, but I am stating it so that some person doesn't go, what about Ashwin and what about Vaishak and Jeshta and blah blah blah. No, then you have no idea what you're doing, you have not read Mahabharata, you don't understand the logic of scientific method. Do understand the upper limit, do understand the lower limits. They are Kartik Purnima and Chaitra Purnima. Everything has to fit in between. That's the demand of a Mahabharata evidence. Okay. Now, for that purpose, taking all the phases and positions of the moon through the 18 days of the war, plus minus whatever is happening there, is sufficient. Of course, we should take all the descriptions. Got it? So we got the evidence. Now, how do we go about objectively testing it? You can do a mathematical calculation if that's your fancy, or if you're like me, efficient, want to be efficient, okay, and make it visible, make it visual for people to understand it, one would use astronomy simulation like I used. In the process, now of course we know the answer. Based on that, I'm telling you, I'm asserting the answer you get is only one day, Kartik Amavasya, no other day. So all the internal astronomy evidence of the Mahabharata text, specifically the phases and positions of the moon through the 18 plus days of the Mahabharata war. What I meant is the Mahabharata war happened for 18 days, but of some events before and after the Mahabharata war, and the description of the phases and positions of the moon, if you take that, is going to take you to Kartik Amavasya, no other day. Just like a planetary evidence will take you to 5561 BCE and no other year, similarly this phases and positions of the moon, 40 plus super rich evidence from the 18 plus days of the Mahabharata war, will only take you to one answer, Kartik Amavasya, no other. And of course, in the process, you need a background knowledge. Very simple, straightforward. Well, I am saying it's simple. It may not be simple for you. If that's not the case, stop here. Become familiar with Indian lunisolar calendar. The lunar months, the Shukla Paksha, the Krishna Paksha, the Shuddha Paksha, the Vadya Paksha, the Tithis, okay, the waxing moon phase and the waning moon phase, and whichever way it works. become familiar so that you truly understand this, truly enjoy this. So this completes, okay, all 5 elements are listed. We have clearly stated the problem, and actually we have clearly given the answer. The answer is Kartik Amavasya. Okay. Now, how did I arrive at this? Now, this is always a challenge because unless a person has the prerequisites required background knowledge, the person may find it boring, the person may find it tiring, confusing, all of this. On the other hand, those of you who have done some pre-work and also have a Shraddha as a great thing going for you. In fact, that is one of the meaning. Actually, there are many meanings, but even if you just want to take one meaning, why Bhagavad Gita says Shraddhavan labhate jnanam. Because if the person is full of doubts, samshay, then and I notice this every time I give lectures and a question answer session and one-on-one chats. Okay, and I have said this in many of my lectures. The problem I see is majority of the people, when they should put Shraddha, they become doubtful. When they should actually become doubtful and ask the question and challenge me or other researchers in question, that's when they put their faith into this. That's our challenge. That's a challenge for all of us, me included. Like, how do I respond? How do I solve this problem? I don't know. So do homework if you find this heavy, but if you have done your homework, you are going to thoroughly enjoy it. Anytime you have not done the homework and you say, how did that happen? Well, Shraddha might help, at least as a stopgap solution, until you say, okay, I'm going to trust Nilesh, what Nilesh is saying. But trust but verify, guys. Trust but verify. So for time being, you may trust, but then have that ardent desire to go back and find out for yourself. Okay, so let's with that let's begin with the explanation. Okay, it's very brief and crisp explanation, and just that is to avoid making this video too long. What the Mahabharata says, and as a reference, if you want to read that, go read my book Bhishma Nirvana. Okay, and specifically in this context, chapter number 4. Okay, it says astronomy evidence, and I have the book in front of me, and I'll read some of the shlok as I find them relevant. The first 5 days, so war begins day 1. Okay, that's Kartik Amavasya. But remember, I don't want you to think this is a circular reasoning, like I'm giving the answer Kartik Amavasya and therefore I'm making you believe this. No, let's say we don't know Kartik Amavasya, but keep that answer in the back of your mind, just like you watch a Netflix crime series or serial, right, where you already know, you as an audience know who committed the crime, but the detectives don't know, and the entire series is about how detectives find it out, but you all along know it. Think of it very similar to this. You already all along know the answer. Kartik Amavasya is the answer, but I'm going to walk you through how I found it. For example, if you read the descriptions, the first 5 days, what you find is that the fighting stopped at the sunset. Now see how the digression enters the picture. And this is again because of our enormous ignorance about the details of Mahabharata. Like somebody says, yeah, what's wrong with it? Well, didn't they make the agreement and a condition that the war must stop at a sunset? Nonsense. They did not, they meaning the Kauravas and Pandavas, did not make any such agreement. Go read Mahabharata for heaven's sake. If you understand that, then you understand the importance of this fighting stopping at the sunset for the first 5 days of the war. Let's move on without digression. Number 2. First 7 days, there are no descriptions of the moon. Now, some troll, some idiot is going to say, well, look here, there is one description of the moon. Yeah, fine. That's the beauty of a scientific method. Okay, like if it's a tennis match, some guy, a loser, hits one ace, ace serve, that is, not a problem. He gets 1 point, and then you know what? The other side just bamboozles this guy and wins over. Okay, So yes, there you occasionally you may find some reference to moon. As a adherent of the scientific method, you should count it, hold it against you, and count it as a part of truth likeness score. If you don't know what truth likeness score is, go read my book Bhishma Nirvana, go read books by Karl Popper, listen to my talks, on and on. So second point is, first 7 days there are no descriptions of the moon, and keep that in mind. First 5 days fighting stopped at the sunset. In fact, the very first day, which is, now you know the answer because you're watching the detective serial, okay, that the description of the Mahabharata text says, as soon as there was a sunset, it was all very dark. It was so dark that individual warriors could not see each other. Now, what does that, as a educated guess, points you to? It points you to the day of Amavasya, or a day closer to Amavasya. ततः सैनेषु भग्नेषु मथीतेषु च सर्वशा प्राप्ते चास्तं दिनकरे न प्राज्ञायत किंचन. That's what Vyasadeva says in the Mahabharata text, a description of the battlefield immediately after the sunset on the first day of the Mahabharata War. Okay, fighting stopped right at the sunset. Everyone went back to their camps, and that was that. Also, notice first 7 days there are no descriptions of the moon. One more thing, beginning 6th day, actually fighting continued for some time beyond sunset. Make a note of this. Now, did it happen every day? Well, there are some exceptions, but yes, on the 6th day, first 5 days, no fighting after sunset. It stopped right at sunset. On the 6th day, fighting did continue beyond sunset for some time. 7th day, no. 8th day, it continued beyond sunset. 9th day, it continued beyond sunset. And 10th day, it did not. Okay, but we'll see why that is so. Also, because I mentioned the first 7 days there are no descriptions of the moon, naturally one might have guessed there must be something happening different on the 8th day. The answer is yes. On the 8th day, that is 8th day is the first time there are descriptions of the moon in the context of the events of the battlefield fighting, or events after the day's fighting is over. Okay, and that first time you see descriptions of the moon is on the 8th day of the war. Okay, day 10 is the day of Shukla Paksha. And guys, again, I'm just going to use this opportunity to tell you, I don't know, I'm going to ask a question and answer that question in your mind. How many of you had this opportunity? How many of you were lucky that during your childhood, or when you were growing, or now, you had a chance to spend extended time away from the city light pollution, away from the big cities, in small towns, not even towns these days because there is enough light pollution, small villages away from the light pollution, or at the top of the mountain or on the ocean side, doesn't matter, where you get clear skies, no light pollution. Answer the question in your own mind. But if you have that chance, then you already know what I'm referring to. If you don't, if you did not have such a chance, find a way, if you find this subject exciting, to take some breaks from your work, from your education, whatever that you are doing, and maybe you will not be may not have a luxury to take a time, extended time for like 2-3 months, but do it in small segments, like a few days, 5-6 days, 10 days, whatever you can afford to take. Go to a village, go to a place away from the light pollution, especially during the time when the skies are clear, and observe the dynamics, the sunrise, the sunset, the position of the moon with respect to the sun, the phases and positions of the moon, and the brightness or a darkness created at night due to the presence of the moon, due to the absence of the moon, and due to the specific phases of the moon. Okay, other than that you can't understand what I am saying. Of course, the first 4 bullets, but the day bullet number 10. On the 10th day, the 10th day of the Mahabharata War is indeed the day of Shukla Paksha. And you say, so what? Shukla Paksha happens in every month for 15 days, and Krishna Paksha or the Vadya Paksha for 15 days. What's the big deal? The big deal is only always in the context. Remember, there is this group of Mahabharata researchers, and of course, followers or blind followers or people in general, because they heard somewhere, they say, yeah, I know it started on Shukla Paksha Ekadashi, Margashirsha Shukla Ekadashi, because that's the day I celebrate Gita Jayanti and I chant Bhagavad Gita and so on. This evidence, of course, all the first four bullets, but especially the five, and very crisp and specific, is saying that the first day of the war, anyone claiming first day of the war to be equal to Shukla Paksha Ekadashi, forget the month for a minute, okay? They claim Margashirsha Shukla Ekadashi, but just stick to even just the Shukla Paksha Ekadashi or Dwadashi or Trayadashi or Chaturdashi or Purnima is simply impossible. Therefore, this evidence on the 10th day of the war that Ashwathama refers to decisively falsifies anyone claiming the first day of the war to be equal to Shukla Paksha Ekadashi, Dwadashi, Trayadashi, Chaturdashi, Purnima. Now you go find out who these folks are, okay? What is that evidence? The evidence is that the moon rose with its pointed ends down, and that is a signature sign of the moon of Shukla Paksha. And therefore, you having a actual experiential astronomy opportunity now or in the past is required, because otherwise none of this will make sense to you, okay? The specific shlok that is given on for the 10th day is apasavyam grahaschakrur lakshmanam nishakaram avakshirascha bhagavan uttishta chandrama. So the moon rose with its pointed ends down, and that is a signature sign of a moon of a Shukla Paksha, and therefore it decisively falsifies anyone claiming the first day of the Mahabharata War to be either Shukla Paksha Ekadashi, Dwadashi, Trayadashi, Chaturdashi or Purnima. Okay. Now, what else happened on this day? Fighting stopped with the falling of Bhishma on the battlefield. That's why very likely it stopped at the sunset, because Bhishma fell before that, and then actually people stopped fighting. Everyone, the members of both party, okay, Bhishma is a Pitama, you know that. The both party, they came together, a lot of things happened. That's not the subject, so we will bypass that subject. Now, since that day, Bhishma is protected by soldiers. That particular area is free from the fighting for rest of the remaining 8 days of the war, because Bhishma is lying there on the bed of arrows waiting for the day of winter solstice. Mahabharata tells us that Bhishma from the 10th day was waiting for the day of winter solstice for more than 95 days. Okay, and that takes us to 5561 BC. But back to Kartik Amavasya. So it's telling us that the 10th day was a day of a Shukla Paksha. Okay, by this evidence itself doesn't tell us which tithi, but it tells us it was definitely the day of Shukla Paksha. Now something very interesting. Well, everything is interesting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but now 6. Pay attention. Beginning day 10, which is this day, moon is described by Vasudev in the different context in describing the different scenes, different descriptions of the fighting, war, etc. The description of a battlefield at the end of the day, whatever. The full moon, the comparison is made with a full moon or full moon like moon, and this begins on the day 10th and continues to the end of the war, 18th day, and a day more. So if you count 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, these are 10 days. And if you just write at the middle, and that's how it is, by the way. So 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay, so those are 4. And the 14 and 16, count this as number 5 and 6. Okay, and that's like the middle, right at the middle. And that is the day of Purnima. And so then if you take those 14 and 15 as the day of Purnima, like because through the night, and then what you are left with? 4 days on one side from 10, 11, 12, 13. And 16, 17, 18, 19 on the other side. So a total period of 10 days described by Vyasadeva many times, many descriptions, like a full moon like, and that's how actually it is. And therefore, again, I'm asking you to go get that experience if you don't have this already. Going to a place away from light pollution, spending significant time and getting familiar with the dynamics of the moon, its phases and positions, and in the context of the sun, okay, away from the sun, coming towards the sun, the Shukla Paksha and Krishna Paksha, and so on. This is very important, guys. This is how it tells us the first day of the Mahabharata War, and actually even the lunar month when the Mahabharata War took place. We are going to jump into that right now. Now, beginning bullet number 7, moon is described. So far we looked at the phases of the moon, and sometime where the pointed ends are, like in bullet number 5, that tells us it was the 10th day was a Shukla Paksha, and that allows us to falsify lots of other claims, such as anyone claiming first day to be Shukla Paksha Ekadashi, the so-called Gita Jayanti day. That's not correct. And of course, now that should raise another question. So why do we celebrate Gita Jayanti on a Margashirsha Shukla Ekadashi? I have made many videos on that already, and who knows, I may make another one sometime down the line. Okay, but now back to number 7. Moon is described near Nakshatra Kritika on the 12th day of the war. So far we looked at the phases of the moon. Now we are looking at the position of the moon. Okay, keep this in mind. I'm going to take you through the simulation through the 18 plus days of the Mahabharata War. On the 13th day, the full moon like moon is described near Rahu, as if like having an eclipse. Whether it had eclipse, that's a different issue. Well, not on the 13th day, but maybe on a Purnima. Did we have eclipse? The answer is yes, and that is also described, but even we are not going to spend time there. The main important point is very surprising, not so surprising if you understand the dynamics in the sky. The full moon like moon is described near Rahu on the 13th day of the war. Just keep that in mind when we get to the actual evidence, okay? And number 9, moon is described near Punarvasu on the 17th day of the war. Now this is when knowing the entire list of nakshatras by heart, but knowing their sequence, ability to recognize the yogatara of each nakshatra in the sky, all of this becomes of paramount importance. If you don't have that, this is darn boring. Why are you even listening to me? Think about it. Okay, all right. The next point, and therefore I'm going to make it bit more interesting and only a little interesting, I'm going to show you the simulation. Number point 10, Kaurava army stayed on the battlefield through the 17th night of the war. Okay, very interesting. Now somebody will just say, well, that's almost done, and so they stayed. No, I mean, that could be the reason. The point is, it is a bright night. Okay, that 17th day is literally a day or two after the full moon day, and again it's going to be literally like a full moon night, and that's why it was easy for the Kaurava army to also stay on the battlefield. Okay, they might have chosen for additional reason, but that's the point. Now the position of the moon, full moon like moon, remember full moon like moon is from day 10 to day 19, is given near Kritik on the 12th day, is full moon like moon near Punarvasu is given on the 17th day. So we can infer the positions for the day 13, 14, 15, 16, and where would they be? They would be between Kritika and Punarvasu along Rohini, Mrugashirsha, Ardra. In fact, Kritika kind of is like a 12th day, then you go 13th and 14th, and so the moon and the full moon, of course we know that, is between what? Margashirsha, the Mrugashirsha and Ardra, and that is a full moon of Margashirsha. Okay, that orientation tells us it was the lunar month of Margashirsha, and all of this description, those who understand even the basics of astronomy, especially the lunisolar calendar, the Shukla Paksha, the Vadya Paksha, the crescent moon, its effect on the illumination at night, they will immediately know definitely the first day was the day of Kartik Amavasya or Amavasya, or a day close to Amavasya. Amavasya max plus minus 1 day. That must be clear. If not, watch these videos again, read my books, read my blogs, watch additional videos, then come back to this. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I am going to take you to simulation. The first day of simulation, we are on 16th October 5561 BC. You can read it here. The timing is about 4:30 in the morning. Those of you who are not at all familiar with simulation, well, tough luck. I'll just try to make it as easy as I can, but there are limits. Okay, this green line here, like a garland in your neck, around your neck or so, this is the horizon. Above that is the sky above our head that we see. Below that we cannot see, okay, because earth is round, etc., etc. At 4:30 in the morning on 16 October 5561 BCE, 7500 plus years ago, this is the position of the sun below the horizon. This is the position of the moon. This is the day of Amavasya. That's why they are close to each other below the horizon. There are hundreds of things to explain here. I am not going to do that. It will not be useful to you. It will be only confusing. Think of this, this portion that you see, think of this as a shadow of the moon, okay? And verily you can think of this as a shadow of the moon, but also shadow of the earth, like shadow of the earth for the context of a lunar eclipse, shadow of the moon for the context of solar eclipse, okay? But you will see quickly a demonstration of that. So what I'm going to do, with a step change of 1 minute, I'm going to start this. I will change as required to emphasize a specific point. Notice the stars are fading away as the time for sunrise comes. Sun is going to come above the horizon there along with the moon, and all stars are gone, okay, the daybreak. Let me stop it for a second here. This is very interesting, okay? So notice the position of the moon as if like with its shadow. Just if you want to imagine it like this, take it in a very crude fashion. If you take it too seriously, then you will confuse the hell out of yourself and waste my time too. Okay, very interesting that in Marathi we call it, or even Sanskrit must be Veda, you know. In Marathi they will say Grahanache Veda lagle, okay, which is to say the celestial body, whether we are referring to the moon or the earth, depending on which eclipse we are talking, is into the secondary shadow, the penumbra, okay, the umbra and the penumbra, okay. So like that, that's what the Veda is. The eclipse itself has not started, but something is already happening, and we can see the effects, indirect effects on the ground and so on. In that context, it's very interesting what Bhishma Parva describes. The sunrise of the first day of the Mahabharata War, and that's why I have stopped it here. You know how Vyasadeva describes it? He describes it as follows: Dvidha bhuta ivaditya udaye pratyadrushyata jwalantya shikhaya bhuyo bhanumanu dito divi. The first day, the sun rose as if split in two. So imagine, just for imagination purpose, because I don't want to take you too deep into this, can be more confusing than useful. Imagine this shadow as if like when the sun is coming, maybe in the central portion it's not that bright, or the light that it is throwing, on one side it is throwing bright light, another side it is throwing bright light because of, say, the penumbra, for example, and the middle one is there, the light is coming through because it's penumbra, guys, okay? It's like, think of, just for a metaphor, guys, just for metaphor is meant for your education. It's not to be taken literally, and that's where my trolls or snob Sanskrit experts go haywire, okay? Think of this only as a metaphor. Just make you understand the difference between, say, penumbra and umbra, okay, the main core portion of the shadow versus the secondary portion of the shadow. Think of the plastic material or a glass, but plastic material would be even easier. Think of a plastic material that is transparent versus translucent. For example, transparent means not only the light passes through, but you can almost see on the other side. Like many times, like, say, polycarbonate, like Lexan, or transparent nylon, acrylic, okay, our headlights, you know, the cover for the headlights, and there are more other things, or transparent glass, for example. What is translucent? Translucent is, imagine like your juice can or 4-liter milk can made out of high density polyethylene. Okay, what is it? The light passes through. You can look at your 4-liter can and of milk and see or juice and see how much juice or milk is left inside. So light is passing through, but you cannot see the way you see through a transparent glass like a mirror. You cannot see that. Something like this, think of penumbra and umbra. Okay, but with that, the interesting description is that Vasudev describes the rising of the sun on the first day as if split in two. Isn't that fascinating? Okay, and then there are many descriptions. In fact, let me continue the simulation. Now see, there is a bright light. In a minute, when the eclipse begins, you are going to see the entire sky darkens. Okay, now if you have seen a solar eclipse, again it depends on what kind of solar eclipse, but you will still see this effect. Okay, basically the sky darkens, and depending on the extent or the intensity of that darkness, you may even be able to see the stars. Okay, so the eclipse has begun, and that's the description. In fact, there is no direct there is a description to the eclipses, these solar and lunar eclipses at the time of Mahabharata War. There is no specific crisp and clear mention of a solar eclipse on the first day of the Mahabharata War, but because we can show with enormous evidence that the first day was the Kartika Amavasya itself, it's not unreasonable to think that there could be eclipse. Well, here we are at least showing a possibility of an eclipse. Now, why did I say possibility when actually you can see the eclipse? Because of something known as our delta T correction, or our ability to exactly know the position of the moon. It's very difficult. Okay, and especially as we go back beyond 2000 years, that is very difficult. So all we can say is that there was an eclipse, there is a good chance for an eclipse. We cannot state exactly what kind of eclipse it was and from where exactly it was seen, but Vasudev is describing it happening on Kurukshetra, at least at the time of the Mahabharata War, and here in simulation we can show it. So there is a good corroboration if indeed there was an eclipse on the first day. Okay, all right, now what you'll find is that the eclipse is over, and for some time the sky is going to get clear, like bright with the sunlight, before sun goes to goes below the horizon, that is a sunset. Now just watch as it happens. Okay, here the eclipse is almost over. Notice it brightens the sky, and of course almost the end of the day. So now sun is going below the horizon, and I'm going to let this simulation flow. So you start noticing how the brighter stars become visible, and as sun goes further down the horizon, all other stars show up. Okay, this is a simulation as close as possible of our actual experience, but don't forget this is a simulation. Okay, and therefore I ask you to take some time off, multiple times if required, and add this wonderful thing to your experience. Okay, so this is day one is over. The description says as soon as the sun was set, or there was a sunset, it was so dark that the warriors standing next to each other could not recognize themselves. This is also a signature of a Amavasya day, or a day close to Amavasya. Amavasya plus minus 1 day or 2 days. Tatah saineshu bhagneshu mathiteshu cha sarvasha prapte chastam dinakare na pradnya yata kinchana. Okay, you cannot even see each other, it was so dark. That's what the description is saying. This is the end of the day one. Okay, the fighting stopped right at the sunset. Now I'm going to change the jump start, or what you call step change, to 1 day, and we are going to go to the next day. Okay, so next day, so this is day 2, end of the day. Again the fighting stopped right at the sunset. Let me go to day 3 and day 4 and day 5. All 5 days fighting stopped at the sunset. Now, could be many reasons, but one of the reasons very important to know is that after sunset there is nothing to illuminate the sky other than the stars. Moon is there for some time. The problem is its illumination for the first 5 days is less than 20%. Okay, interestingly, did you see where I showed 20%? If not, invest in a software and become familiar. Here, illumination 21% and it's the 5th day. Okay. Alrighty. Now, so 6th day something else happened. If you remember what I said. Okay. So 6th day, the war continued for some time after sunset, but then eventually stopped. 7th day stopped at sunset. 8th day war continued after some time. Okay, now remember, 8th day is also the day when for the first time a description of moon occurs. Now notice, just for a reference, what is the illumination? About 54%. Okay, some decent illumination is there, and not a surprise that the moon description occurs in the Mahabharata text. Okay, this is day 8. Let's go to day 9. Okay, and I'll show the illumination also. Okay, 65%, not bad. It's pretty bright actually. Okay, but other than that, yeah, life goes on. Okay, now something interesting begins with the 10th day. So 10th day, lot of things actually happen. 25, but from our particular problem of the first determining the first day, notice this is the day when what happens when the moon is described as rising, that is from the eastern horizon of course, with its pointed ends down, and I said that is a classic signature of a moon of a Shukla Paksha, and the 10th day is the moon of a Shukla Paksha, and that decisively falsifies anyone claiming the first day of the Mahabharata war to be the day of Shukla Paksha, Ekadashi, Dwadashi, Trayodashi, Chaturdashi or Purnima. If you understand, great. If you don't understand, take it on a Shraddha right now, but I would encourage you to put your personal effort, Swadhyaya Pravachane, Abhyasa Yoga Yuktena, to understand why that is so. Okay, if you invest in a software and if you go somewhere in a remote place and observe the moon for at least through couple of cycles, like a couple of months worth of cycle, you understand why anytime moon is rising with pointed ends down, that means it's a Shukla Paksha. Okay, but that's what Ashwatthama is saying on the 10th day of the war. This is the day Bhishma fell in the battle, but for our purpose there is another interesting thing. Beginning the 10th day of the war through all the way to the last day of the war, 18 day plus 1. Remember, I said this, 10, 11, 12, 13. So these 4 days. Then 14 and 15. Think of this as the middle portion. Okay, that is the full moon day. And then 16, 17, 18, 19. So if you take the full moon day and night middle, like 2 days, 14 and 15 of the war, 4 days before that and 4 days after that, all these 10 days, many of the events when Vyasadeva are describing into the through the Bhishma Parva and Drona Parva and Karna Parva and Shalya Parva and Sautik Parva and Stri Parva and so on, you are going to see many, in fact almost tiring number of descriptions of the full moon or full moon like moon. What is it signifying? Well, that's why I said right there on this day, 25th October 5561 BC, look at the illumination of the moon. Okay, if it's not clear here, pause the video, stop the video, watch this. 76%. Okay, 3/4 of it is visible, and it's only going to get better to the Purnima day and slightly lower, but it will not go below 75% by the time you go to the 19th day. Okay, and no wonder Vyasadeva describes this as a full day. Now, some of the crazy trolls or snob Sanskritists, they don't understand this. So when Vyasadeva describes this as an actual descriptions or as a nimitta or as a anumana or as a upamana, they say, well, that's a upaman, that's not evidence. Well, that's because they don't understand science, they don't have a scientific acumen, they don't have a logical reasoning skills. That's why I show this doubt clearing machine every time. to explain what is a theory, how theory drives the evidence, how theory defines what must be included as a evidence, and also there is an insistence, if it has to be a scientific theory, that it must be objectively testable. What we are doing here is objective testing, guys. Of course, we are doing it using a simulation, but objective testing nevertheless. Okay, so we can actually look at the estimates of the illumination and then try to relate to why Vyasa would have called the moon through these 10 days a moon like a full moon, or full moon like moon. Okay, so because the illumination is like more than a 3/4, okay, 75% plus. Okay, so I covered 10 day. Now it gets interesting. Okay, let's go to 11th day, and I'm going to make this bigger, okay, because I want to show you some very interesting additional things. Okay, on the 10th day itself I have something else. So for a second, let me go back. Okay, so yes, the 10th day the moon is described like a full moon, okay, but something else. For example, what Vyasadeva describes is like the full moon is grasping Rahu, or you can say Rahu is grasping full moon, whichever way you want to look at it. And what could be the reason? So that's given as a shlok, that's given as a description. Can we corroborate it? Look at this. This green or yellow line is the ecliptic, is the path of the sun. This other line is the path of the moon. When they intersect, okay, that intersection is basically the node. And one more thing, as far as the Ramayana and Mahabharata is concerned, the node is always described as Rahu, never as a Ketu, the way we described it in our modern Indian astronomy. Okay, so the Indian astronomy speak like this would be like a Ketu, for example, you know, like it's because moon orbit is crossing and is going further to the south. But in Mahabharata as well as in Ramayana, it's always the Rahu. And what is that description? You know, that Rahu grasping the sun. The description comes as like this. And again, by the way, there is a full moon like description. Dushasanam tatah kruddha pidayamasa pandava parvaniva susankruddho rahu purne nishakaram. Okay, a full moon like moon is been grasped by Rahu. What is this position of Rahu? Right here. Okay, and we are going to get more descriptions, and a full moon like 75% plus illuminated moon here. Okay, now we are ready to go to day number 11. Okay, now what happens on day 11? Okay, you have more descriptions of the moon and many other things. Okay, let's go to day number 12. We are going to have lots of interesting things. The first one is full moon is shown 25 is 10th, 26 20 okay, sorry, so I have to go one day back, guys. So here, keep me honest here. Okay, so 25th October is the 10th day, 26th October is the 11th day, and 27th October is the 12th day. Okay, now it's a full moon like moon. Remember, look at the illumination, 91.9, 92% plus, practically full illumination. Again, that's why you need a experiential shock to your life, because if you look at the full moon or full moon like moon through say Ekadashi, Dwadashi, Trayodashi, Chaturdashi and Purnima, and frankly 4 days say after, you will not, if you will understand it's not completely full, but you will not able to actually distinguish between the full moon versus the moon that you are seeing plus minus 3 or 4 days. That's how the slow change takes place. Okay, because to your naked eye, okay, the perception is essentially it's a full moon. Okay, 90% plus is like that, 80% plus is like that, the 75%, 80% you start seeing some difference, but you say, I mean, hey, I know it's not a full moon day, full moon, but it is like full moon. I'm spending this time for a reason. Okay, all right, so we are on the 12th day. What are the descriptions? First thing, there is a beautiful description for the first time, not only of the phase of the moon, like a full moon, but actually the position of the moon. Okay, and again, how does this come? This comes as a upaman. Okay, for example, on the 12th day, the white canopy on the chariot of the king Bhagadatta is described, is compared with the full moon near Kritika. Now that is the beauty of a Vyasadeva. It's written, Ityasa is written in a kavya form, okay, as a arsha kavya, in a poetry form. And see how Bhagwan Vyasadeva is bringing all these wonderful pieces together. Celestial is equal to terrestrial. Something is happening on the ground, such as simple thing, a not so simple thing, as a canopy of Bhagadatta, the canopy that covers on the chariot of a Bhagadatta, and he's comparing that with the full moon near Nakshatra Kritika. And exactly at the same time, if somebody looks at the sky, they are going to see exactly the same thing. Okay, Malya Damavata Raja Shweta Chatrena Dharyata Kritika Yoga Yuktena Paurnamasya Mivenduna Induna. That's a moon. Paurnamasya is a full moon. Kritika Yoga Yuktena. Okay, it's in the vicinity of Kritika, near Kritika, in conjunction with Kritika. You can translate in 10 different ways. Meaning does not change for practical purposes. Very beautiful. Of course, there are many other full moon descriptions for the same day, such as Sampurna Chandrabhamukha Padma Patra Nimekshana, on and on. I'm going to skip many of them. You can read my book Bhishma Nirvana to actually see them. And frankly, after writing Bhishma Nirvana, I realized that I missed many. Okay, but never mind. Okay. Anything interesting for the 12th day? No. Just notice that we have a first time the mention of the position of the moon. Let's go to 13th day. Now this was a very eventful day, okay, and very touching day. This is the day when Kauravas murdered, okay, killed Abhimanyu in a very bad manner. Okay, this is the 13th day. Notice the position of the full moon. The illumination is at 96.8, that's 97%. Notice the position of the moon very next to the node, the Rahu. Okay, and this is captured by Vasudev. How? Upaplutam yatha somam sashushkamiva sagaram purna chandra bhavadanam kaka paksha vrutakshakam. Okay, looking at the face of Abhimanyu, which looked like a full moon, and as if, because he is dead, okay, as if grasped by the Rahu, or Upaplutam yatha somam. This is Upaplutam is like a eclipse, as if, or I don't say eclipse, as if like eclipse, a perception of eclipse. Okay, so two things. First thing, it's a something naturally a very sad thing that has happened on the ground, but Vasudev in his amazing brilliance is connecting that with what he's seeing up in the sky. A full moon like a moon, and as if it is eclipsed, because also notice it's very close to the position of the node. In reality, mathematically node is a point. For practical purposes, node is a line. Okay, so the eclipse that will happen, it can happen anywhere into this area, because for an eclipse to occur, lot of things have to align: the position of the sun, moon, earth, and the timing, and whether we can see it or not, therefore the timing. Okay, so therefore he's saying as if. In reality, there is no eclipse here on this day. Again, a lot of full moon description, but let's move on to the day 14th. Okay, again, very interesting day. We will do a full episode or a series of episode on the 14th day of the war, because it's very critical, but critical for many reasons. Critical for the Mahabharata War itself. This is the only day among 18 days where the war practically continued through the night. Okay, they fought through the night. Why? Because it was a day of a full moon. Do you see this double shadow, double circle? Okay, that is the position when the Purnima ends. So here the Purnima has begun on the 14th day. Okay, and through the whole night the fighting continues. So we'll do a separate episode, because many immature Mahabharata dating researchers have created atrocious nonsense as it relates to the 14th night of the Mahabharata War. Okay, but for today's discussion, all you want to note is it was a full moon like moon. If you go into the 14th chapter, you will, 14th descriptions of the 14th day and night, you will see many full moon descriptions, amazing description, the brightness, the illumination of the moon, and so on. Okay, let's quickly go through this 14, but also the 15th day. Drona was killed, and just like the fighting stopped when Bhishma fell down, similarly when Drona was killed, the fighting stopped on the 15th day. Okay, and let's go to the 16th day. Okay, now 16th day, now Karna is captain, what you can say, the general, military general of the Kaurava side. The war begins. If you look through the descriptions of the 16th day, you are going to see a tiring number of references. Full moon described as a full moon. Okay, not a surprise. Look at that illumination there. Okay, 98%. Essentially, the day of a full moon or just a day after full moon. Okay, many references. I'm going to skip through that. 17th day of the war. Okay, now so let me do that here. Okay, so this is 16. Now I'm going to go to the 17th day of the war, and something very interesting. Okay, I might have to bring you back to 16 for a second. Okay, so let me pull the one reference from the 16th day. I want to skip the full moon references, they are there, but something very interesting. On this day, again a Upaman. Okay, what is happening is that the many folks are getting killed into the war, big warriors, and the fallen faces on the battlefield, they are appearing like the full moon. That's what Vasudeva is saying. But something very interesting, how are they looking? As if their face is like a full moon, and on the side they have the kundala, in their ears. And what Vasudeva is comparing is so beautiful here. He's saying, okay, so look at this picture, full moon, and what do you see on the other sides, both sides? One side you have the two stars of Punarvasu. Okay, what is that? The Pollux and Castor. Let me see if I can quickly show you that. This is Castor, this is Pollux. These are the two stars of Gemini, the Mithun Rashi that you see. And these are additional two stars of Punarvasu. One is this Procyon, another name is the Canis Minor, the small dog. Okay, and this Gomesha. So two on this side, Shaka, a Vishesha branch, and two on the other side. Okay, this is how Punarvasu is described. Sometime with 2 stars, sometime with 4 stars. You already know it, great. If you don't know it, take it on a Shraddha. Start reading S.B. Dikshit's books, History of Indian Astronomy, okay, and many of his other books and other books on Indian astronomy. For now, take it on a Shraddha, or you already know it, but this is part of background knowledge. Such a beautiful description. I'm going to read it. Shirascha tatpurna shashi pramananam prabhananam purna shashi, that's full moon. Sarosh, by the way, when I'm reading it here, the light is not very good, so I cannot read it properly. Saroshatamra yatanetra munnasam kshito bibrabhaja patatsa kundalam vishakhayor madhyagata shashiyatha. Just like the moon is between two Vishakhas, right in the middle of Vishakhas. Okay, now this is a funny part. Some people, take this and laugh at me and says, okay, so can Nilesh show the full moon between Vishakhas? Yes, I do, only if you understand what Vishakhas are. And this is so consistent, guys. The descriptions where Punarvasus are referred to Vishakha exist here in the Mahabharata. Don't take my word. Read Mahabharata, but also Valmiki Ramayana. Exactly the same way Punarvasus are described as Vishakha in Valmiki Ramayana. And therefore I wrote either in Valmiki Ramayana, in my Ramayana book or Mahabharata book, the additional research. People ask me for ideas. Well, guys, this is the idea. Go research the entire Indian literature looking for a specific reference where Punarvasus are called Vishakhas. Now, of course, beyond Ramayana and Mahabharata, because that's what I have found. But any independent reference would be wonderful. Okay, here I give you an idea. Now go work on it for as long as until you find the answer. Any takers? Okay, let's go further. So this is that Vishakayor Madhyagata Shashiyata. But if someone has a doubt, okay, well, so Nilesh, now you're calling Punarvasus as Vishaka. Well, all you have to do is just wait for another day. Okay, there is no confusion. We already saw moon is near Kritika on the 12th day, and we could show it. We on the 16th day we are showing it between two Vishakhas. Okay, now there is a nakshatra Vishaka also, and with the two bright stars, and poets have used it. By the way, okay, let me go to 17th day and then state this. So let's go to the 17th and therefore the second last day of the war. Okay, so here is a full moon, and look behind it. Like, so imagine this as the before we imagine this to be the face of the warrior the previous day, and Karna Kundala, okay, into the warriors, and that's how the comparison with the two Punarvasu stars on one side, two Punarvasu on the other. Now that we go one more day, now here beautiful Vyasa is using another upaman where King Yudhishthir was on the chariot and he was protected by two Panchala warriors, okay, flanks, what we call, on his backside. And so this is Yudhishthir and one Panchala warrior here, another Panchala warrior here. And so you must be wondering, what am I talking? Okay, so now there's specifically a moon between Punarvasu is mentioned. Okay, this is on the 17th day of the war. All the full moon descriptions I'm skipping just to manage the time here, but I will read this verse worth reading where Yudhishthir on his chariot protected by two Panchal warriors, okay, and the scene is compared by Vyasadeva as the full moon between Punarvasus. Now this is such a wonderful upaman analogy that you will see this is again used by likes of Kalidas and likes of Valmiki and likes of other great poets. Okay, you'll see that in Kalidas. Well, guess what? Long before Kalidas, we don't know the exact time of Kalidas, but long before Kalidas, we know that for sure Vyasadeva is using it. Okay, so maybe take another exercise. Even if you don't understand astronomy, find in our ancient literature all the instances or the instances you can find where moon is described between Punarvasus. Okay, but here is one for the start, made 7,500 years ago. Tavubho dharmarajasya praviro pariparshvata rathabhyashe chakashete chandraseva punarvasu. So that Dharmaraj, Yudhishthir going further and protected by two Panchala warriors is compared with the moon and of course the full moon between Punarvasus. Okay, so again a very beautiful description. Again through this upaman, Vyasadeva is telling you the position of the moon near Punarvasu on the 17th, 16th and 17th day of the war, and on the near Kritika on the 12th day of the war. By inference for 13, 14, 15, 16, for 13, 14, 15, we can infer that as near Rohini, Mrugashirsha, Ardra. Bingo! You see it? On the 12th day near Kritika, on the 16th day near Punarvasu, on 17th day moon is followed by Punarvasus. So again in the vicinity of Punarvasus, and we are left with the 13, 14 and 15, and we have Rohini, Mrugashirsha and Adra, and that's exactly where we had the full moon, and that is the full moon of Margashirsha. Remember, we started the war on the Kartika Amavasya, and the war continued through the first half, practically the first half of Margashirsha, and then the 2 days of the second half of Margashirsha. Okay, so with that we come to the last day of the Mahabharata War. Lot of interesting thing happened here, many full moon descriptions and some very interesting description of full moon with sorry, let me close this. Full moon in in the vicinity of Saturn, but we will leave that for another interesting times. But one more thing, so we have to go one more day, that is the 19th day, and let me quickly show you the illumination. It's still 82%, okay, above the 3,475%, and all these 10 days beginning with the 10th day ending with the last day plus one, Vyasadeva repeatedly describes this moon as like a full moon or full moon. and for a reason, because of the illumination. Again, this is very obvious to someone who is very familiar with actually observing the moon through its entire cycle. Okay, that's it, guys. So because of the phases, we know it began with Amavasya and ended near Purnima, a couple of days after Purnima, because of the position of the moon, but not just the position of the moon, but a full moon like moon near Kritika on the 12th day, and there's continuation of that near Punarvasu on the 16th day, in the vicinity of Punarvasu on the 17th day. And so we know that the central portion is the Purnima, which happened around Ardra and Margashirsha. We know it is the lunar month of Margashirsha, and we also know it is the Kartik Amavasya when the war began. We also know that this has to be the time of the Sharat season, okay, because that is the only way we are going to have 95 plus days from the 10th day of the war all the way to the day of winter solstice. Okay, and if you combine all of this, no other choice but go back to the 6th millennium BCE, 5561 BCE. That's it, guys. So I'm going to take you back to the screen. I was going to take it to myself. Okay, you can see me here. Write your comments, do the needed background work. If you did not understand some of the things, that's very possible, but there is no way you can put all the burden on me, because if I get into nitty-gritty details, I am already getting into nitty-gritty details. We will never go beyond the first day of Mahabharata War. Okay, and there is a lot to discuss in Mahabharata, but there is a lot to discuss beyond Mahabharata, beyond Ramayana, and bring it all to our times and how we can use it for achieving prosperity, achieving peace. Okay, and of course the yato abhyudaya nishrayasa, achieving the ultimate good. Okay, beyond the temporary prosperity too. Write your comments, do the needful, which means what? I don't have a bell there, bell icon. Okay, so you are much smarter than me technically, so subscribe and do whatever that needs to be done, so that you know when my next video comes. I'll see you soon in another video with another interesting subject. Until then, namaskar, talk to you soon.